Why do so many men feel incomplete without a partner? Why does society treat single men as failures when history shows that solitude often creates the strongest minds? In this video, Unresolved, we confront the lie you've been fed and unveil the explosive truth that Seneca and the greatest minds of history already knew. Singleness isn't a weakness. It's an unshackled advantage. What if solitude wasn't a curse, but a crown? Something unresolved. In a world that constantly equates togetherness with success, we've overlooked a profound reality. Solitude isn't emptiness. It's raw potential. When a man stands alone, without the distractions of validation or emotional obligation, he begins to see not just the world, but himself. He's not reacting to others, he's sculpting his own reflection. Something unresolved. There's a sacred silence in solitude, a stillness where clarity begins to whisper. Something unresolved. Who are you when no one's watching? That's not just a philosophical question, it's a mirror. In this mirror, a man begins to notice how much of his life was lived in echoes. Echoes of others' desires, expectations, and fears. But in solitude, there are no echoes. Only his voice, his instincts, his truth. This is the very essence of what ancient thinkers like Seneca hinted at. Solitude isn't the absence of company. It's the presence of mastery. A great mind becomes a great man when it learns how to be alone. You might say aloud, and feel the weight of that truth press into your bones. Something unresolved. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Most people are terrified of solitude. Not because it's empty, but because it's full. Something unresolved. Full of the truth they've been avoiding. Full of the fears they've buried beneath entertainment, relationships, noise. But a man willing to confront himself in silence becomes untouchable. Not cold. Centered. Not lonely. Liberated. Imagine waking up, and the only voice guiding your day is yours. No chaos. No emotional friction. Just discipline, direction, and deep alignment. Solitude gives you back the one thing the world constantly tries to steal. Your focus. And in that focus, you build. Not just wealth or strength, but something harder. Character. And character, unlike charm, doesn't need to be performed. It doesn't collapse when you're alone in a dark room. It stands like a mountain. So next time someone says, "You're still single," smile. Not because you're above them, but because you're within yourself. The man who understands solitude isn't escaping the world. He's transcending it. And the world doesn't know what to do with a man who needs nothing from it. What if everything they admire about you isn't even you? Think about it. The jokes you tell to be liked, the smile you fake to avoid tension, the goals you chase not because they're yours, but because they look good. That, right there, is the persona, a carefully crafted mask, polished, rehearsed, refined. And the more you wear it, the more you forget who you were before it ever existed. Who am I? Without their approval, that question stings, because most men never dare to ask it. Unresolved. But the single man, the man who walks alone, he has no choice but to ask it. And in that discomfort, he finds freedom. Because he no longer needs to be anyone but himself. The persona is a survival tool. It was designed to help us navigate society. But somewhere along the line, we began to confuse the mask with the man. We lost ourselves in performance, in pretending, smiling when we're exhausted, agreeing when we want to scream, bending to expectations until we break. And here's the haunting truth. Relationships, especially unhealthy ones, often reinforce the persona. Be this, do that, don't say that, smile more, be stronger, something unresolved. Don't feel that way. The constant emotional editing becomes a slow erosion of authenticity. And before you know it, you're not living, you're appeasing. But solitude. Oh, solitude is the great unmasking. No one to impress, no one to please, no one to correct your posture or your tone. Just you and your shadow. And yes, at first, it's terrifying. Because when you strip away the persona, you don't find perfection. You find wounds. You find contradictions. But those scars, that chaos, that's real. And reality, no matter how messy, is powerful. So ask yourself, how much of your identity is chosen and how much is conditioned, unresolved? How many of your dreams are actually yours? How many of your values are just inherited scripts you never questioned? In solitude, the answers aren't loud, but they're honest. You begin to realize you never needed to become someone for love. You only needed to remember who you were before fear taught you to perform, unresolved. And once that realization hits deep in your bones, you walk differently, you speak differently, and most importantly, unresolved. You no longer flinch when the mask begins to fall. What is the most valuable currency a man owns? It's not money, not status, not even love. It's time. Time is the throne upon which sovereignty sits. But in a world obsessed with speed, noise, and constant interaction, most men have given their time away like loose change dropped on the sidewalk. They trade it for approval, for distractions, for temporary comfort that costs them permanent progress, unresolved. He'll do it tomorrow. I don't want to be alone right now. She needs me. These aren't just excuses. They're theft, something unresolved. Because every time you surrender your hours to the unworthy, you forfeit your kingdom. The single man, if awakened, becomes the ruler of his own time, not because he hates connection, but because he refuses to waste the one thing he can never get back. Ask yourself, who decides how you spend your day? Is it your employer, your partner, your social feed, your anxiety, or you? Most men don't even realize they've become time poor. Not because they're busy, but because they're busy with the wrong things. Useless conversations, shallow intimacy, emotional firefighting. The calendar looks full, but the soul feels empty. Why? Because the hours were stolen. Drained by the demands of people who don't even understand your mission. And if your mission remains unclear, unresolved, someone else will gladly assign you theirs. Now imagine a day governed only by purpose. Waking up not because an alarm told you to, but because your vision did. Reading what feeds your mind. Training what strengthens your body. Building something. Quiet patiently, intentionally. This is not isolation. It's self-direction. There's no need to explain it, no need to defend it. The man who owns his time, owns his life. He's not reactive, he's strategic. He doesn't scroll to escape. He studies to evolve. He doesn't fill the silence. He listens to it. Because in that silence, time stretches, it slows down, it deepens. And in those deep hours, real transformation begins. Something unresolved. People will say, "You're too rigid. You're too distant. You need to loosen up." But what they're really saying is, unresolved. I'm uncomfortable with a man I can't distract, a man who values his minutes more than meaningless validation. Time, when guarded, becomes a weapon, a shield, a sanctuary, and in the hands of a sovereign man, it becomes destiny. They tell you something's missing. That if you're single, if you're walking alone, if you don't have someone next to you every night, then you must be lacking. Lacking love, lacking value, lacking something essential. But what if that's a lie? What if the absence isn't lack, but space? Space to grow, to build, to become. The myth of lack is a spell, cast by a society addicted to attachment. It whispers, "You're incomplete without someone." It shouts, "Something unresolved. What's wrong with you?" When you choose solitude over entanglement. But let's ask a deeper question. Who benefits from this myth? Who profits when you're convinced that you need someone to be whole? A man convinced he's lacking becomes desperate, and desperation sells. It sells dating apps, self-help nonsense, relationship gurus, shallow connections, and endless compromises. But the man who knows he is not lacking, he becomes dangerous. Dangerous to a system that thrives on emotional dependency. But don't you want someone? They ask. Of course. But need is different than want. And that distinction is power. When you operate from fullness, you choose love, not chase it. You share peace, not beg for it. You set standards, not because you're arrogant, but because you're whole. Here's the truth. Many relationships are built on the fear of being alone, not the joy of being together. And fear-based bonds become prisons dressed as comfort. You laugh on the outside, but ache on the inside. You post pictures, but you lose pieces of yourself every day, all because you were taught that being alone equals failure. But what if the opposite is true? What if being alone, by choice, is the highest form of emotional intelligence? What if walking away from chaos, from confusion, from fake affection, is not weakness, but sacred defiance? Look around. Some of the most powerful minds in history walked alone. Not because they were unloved, but because they were focused. They weren't lacking. They were refining, crafting a life, sharpening their soul, preparing their legacy. The myth of lack is a distraction, a loud one, but beneath that noise is a whisper, a deeper truth. That being single is not the absence of connection, but the presence of alignment. That not needing someone doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've arrived. And when you arrive, truly arrive, in your own presence, you stop chasing shadows. You start becoming the light. And when a man becomes the light, he no longer seeks direction, he becomes it.